morning, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the St. Joseph Group podcast. As you probably heard on the last one, my name is JP Voles. I am the COO and partner of St. Joseph Group. This podcast has been a little bit of a pet project and a dream of ours, trying to bring important information and new subjects to clients. You'll notice a stark difference from last episode, which was a couple of weeks ago. It's not too, not last week, but 2 weeks ago. In that this one's being done in English. We try to accommodate the language of the people we're interviewing. And while our guest today is well on his way of becoming fully fluent in Portuguese, he is still a native English speaker. And since the subject is a little bit technical, we figured it best to do it in his native tongue. I'll try to include subtitles to this video for those of you that would like to see it in a different language. But here with us today is Mr. Daniel Botchin. Daniel Botchin is, aside from being a very good friend of mine, a South Dakota attorney specializing in trust and estates. He worked several years as compliance officer for trust companies. He's helped establish our trust company in the past, and today he works as the head of document drafting and revision for the St. Joseph Group in general. So he's overseeing all document creation and revision here in the firm. And we're happy to have him here today. We're going to talk about a very important subject, and I think a subject that's going to be of great interest for some of our clients looking for a little bit more efficiency and a little bit more privacy in their trust maintenance, special purpose entities. So we're going to be talking about these special purpose entities and how they relate to trusts and how they can work, maybe for you. So thank you for joining us, Dan. How are you doing this morning?
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, JP. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, I mentioned SPs, but before we talk about SPs, could you explain to me a little bit about what a South Dakota directed trust is in general, and what are the benefits of these kinds of structures?
Sure. So if you look at a traditional trust, you'll see that the powers of investment and distribution are traditionally held by the trustee, meaning the trustee has fiduciary authority over the assets of the trust, which it administrates per the terms and conditions of the trust instrument. Now, in a South Dakota trust that is directed, what the trust instrument provides for and what is authorized by law is a disaggregation of the powers of the trustee. So whereas a trustee in a traditional trust would have powers over the investments or distributions of a trust, in a South Dakota directed trust, those powers could be given to an investment trust advisor or a distribution trust advisor or an investment trust committee or a distribution trust committee. So in other words, it takes the control over the disposition of the assets of the trust from the trustee to a trusted third party of a settler.
So what essentially we're doing here with the directed trust is that we're allowing clients to invest through trusts, which are highly private, highly protected structures in a highly protective and highly sought after jurisdictions such as South Dakota, while not having to necessarily put all authority over assets and distributions in the hands of someone that's, maybe a stranger, maybe a someone they just met, the trustee. They can instead go and assign whoever they want or someone of their own confidence to occupy the role. Obviously, I know a little bit about the subject. It can't be anyone, right? I mean, looking from a tax perspective, the IRS still wants you to have an adverse party. So no one that's your dependent or your employee. But in general, you can include pretty much anyone of your confidence, whether American or not American, to compose this role or to be a member of a committee, as Mr. Botchin has said. Now, Dan, moving on, what's an SPE and why is it important compared to a standard directed trust and appointing people directly?
Yes. So in a South Dakota directed trust, that is correct. You would have this person or these persons administrate the trust, either in its fiduciary aspect over investments and distributions, or a non-fiduciary aspect as a trust protector, pursuant to the terms and conditions of the trust instrument for the benefit of the trust beneficiaries, with this person being a natural person for an investment trust advisor, a distribution trust advisor, or a trust protector. Now, a natural person is an individual. It's a human being, like you or I, or the viewer or listener. However, for a settler wishing to have a corporate person occupy that role, special requirements must be met at South Dakota law. Now, a corporate person is a non-natural person, and can include a corporation or a limited liability company.
Okay.
And so it is a corporate person serving in that role or in those roles that receives the SPE, or special purpose entity designation, at South Dakota law.
So just to put it in other words and see if I'm getting this right, an SPE would be a corporate person, so an LLC or corp, that's registered with the Division of Banking to be able to serve the role as director or protector or advisor to this trust or to a group of trusts, correct?
Correct. The special purpose entity designation can cover the role of investment trust advisor, distribution trust advisor, or trust protector. And it also can include a combination of those roles. So really what you're looking at is a mechanism at South Dakota law that allows for a corporate person to exercise broad control over the administration of a trust.
But why would clients want to use NSP? So what's the benefit of me putting in a corporate person instead of assigning the natural persons to act on these roles?
Well, suppose you have a sophisticated governance structure. Certain roles to be occupied by certain persons in a heavily prescribed manner. Well, rather than going the route of creating separate investment committees, distribution committees, you could have a corporate person with corporate documents prescribe that role. So you could have that described in a very detailed way in, say, a bylaws of a corporation or operating agreement of a limited liability company. So that would be one reason. Another reason would be to take advantage of the corporate form in order to avoid liability. So a corporation and a limited liability company, almost by definition, have a limitation on personal liability of their ownership and control. And also there may be eligibility for additional insurance that would cover their activities, in this fiduciary capacity for a trust.
So I mean, if I can sum up what you're saying, and I think the thing that attracts me the most about SPEs is that it adds a level of flexibility per se, in the sense that you have a professional listed director that could have the same managers or different managers over time. So the succession of the managerial class of people controlling these assets throughout the lifetime of a family could change without you needing to change the trust instrument itself, which is, it's always a bit more of a pain to do. So you can have this company that not only offers a limitation liability, Dan said, but also offers this flexibility in being able to say, hey, today the person that's my, investment advisor for these assets. My asset manager is X. Tomorrow it's Y. Tomorrow it's Z. And we have a succession plan for it. It also allows the people who are serving these roles to do so privately. So it offers an extra layer of privacy in the sense that they're not explicit in the trust instrument. They're in the corporate documents of the company. Of course, always remembering, privacy is not the same as secrecy. South Dakota, while is a state that promotes privacy, the agents, officers of an SPE can be viewed by the government of South Dakota itself. So, it's South Dakota will obviously have a limited amount of control over the supervision of who these people are, but it's not something that's going to be a matter of public record, and it's not going to be readily available in information exchanges, and it's not going to be explicit in the trust instrument, which is where most banks, most institutions that you're looking to open with or work with are going to ask to see. That's a document they're going to want to see. So by having this professional administrated company that you're creating, you're essentially offering flexibility and additional privacy and a little bit of control. And I like to point out the control aspect of it, in that I know a lot of jurisdictions have a problem with listing the grantor or someone related to the grantor as having any powers under the trust. If we're talking about international trust, you sometimes don't want to have the grantor listed as a protector with the power to reassign or change trustee. But if that power is put even to the grantor inside the SPE, then that information becomes a lot more private, and that instrument becomes a lot more kosher for a lot of these other jurisdictions that might not have as much openness about directed trust as the United States does. Right, so thinking about it a little bit internationally. And one last point I'd like to touch on, which I find incredibly attractive about the structure, is it facilitates the treatment of your trust as either foreign or domestic. So as you guys know, this is a tax law issue. Trusts are considered either foreign or domestic based on two separate tests, both of which need to be completed: the control test and jurisdiction test. So a lot of people are in South Dakota. Obviously, you're meeting most of the requirements of the jurisdiction test. You're here, you're in the United States, you're governed by US law, you're governed by the laws of a US state. But the control test is what most clients use in order to have the protections of US law, or the W-8 foreign tax status for their trusts. And the way you accomplish this is by appointing people who are controlling or having substantial control, the key substantial control of your assets, being non-resident aliens to the United States. And the SPE allows you to do that if the people who are part of the board and have the decision-making authority are not Americans, they're not U.S. persons for tax purposes. You could have a foreign trust governed out of South Dakota through this SPE, and offer the best of both worlds for clients. And should the family move in the future, or should you desire to change it into a U.S. trust in the future and have it be taxed as a U.S. entity, you can do that internally in the company by switching the people who are managing the assets, instead of having to substantially change your trust instrument or trust documentation. So it offers that extra level of flexibility as well. So those are just a few of the benefits. I don't know if I covered everything on that end, Dan, or if you have anything to add.
Well, you covered quite a lot. I think that another way of putting it, is that what an SPA allows you to do is take the corporate governance piece and gird it on to the trust governance piece. So a corporation or a limited liability company then, would work closely with a trustee, in the administration of a trust, offering all of the benefits previously discussed, including privacy, with only the incorporator of the corporation or the organizer of the limited liability company being made a part of the public record, but otherwise being as private as a South Dakota trust, and working again, with the corporate or trustee to ensure the efficient and effective administration of the trust.
Now, I know we're making a good point supporting the SPEs, the structures, but there are some limits to it. I'd like to talk a little bit about the limits, just as a disclaimer to everyone that's looking to do this. Obviously, this isn't the equivalent of I'm going to own my own trust company. The SPE exists in conjunction with a South Dakota trust, normally managed by a South Dakota public trustee. So you need to work in conjunction with the trustee. And what I see, this is not a bad thing. This is a great thing, because what we have is when we go to jurisdictions like Wyoming that have their, very popularly used private trust companies, people who are family offices and fund administrators, we're talking about our clients, they tend to open those structures, but they're subject to all this audit and regulation on top of their structures that sometimes, well, it's not their day-to-day to deal with. By having the SPE plus trust company structure in South Dakota, you're getting an alternative to that where the client himself, the family office, the fund manager, the investment advisor can focus on doing what they do well, which is the advising aspect of it, but they're not putting on the trustee hat. So that public trust company, hope it's us, who's acting as trustee of these trusts, will be able to do all the dirty work. We'll be able to do the audits and the KYCs and maintain everything in order for our regular audits with the Division of Banking. We'll be able to act as fiduciaries in that capacity and keep all the accounting right, while the client and the SPE themselves are working. And in that point, it's also an incredibly inexpensive option when compared to a private trust company out of some other states. So you're focusing on what you can do well. You're having all the flexibility to do it yourself without needing to trust the trustee, but you're doing it at a fraction of the cost that you would if you were to do a private trust company in a different state, working in conjunction with, a South Dakota trust company. I don't know, Dan, do you have any other comments or any other warnings about limitations that might apply to this?
No, I would really just further emphasize that point that compared to a South Dakota trust company, a South Dakota SPE has a de minimis regulatory burden, as stated before. South Dakota is a private jurisdiction, not a secret jurisdiction, so it, as such, needs to have a working relationship with the South Dakota Division of Banking, which is the regulator for fiduciaries in the state. May be required to make certain information available regarding SB to the regulator, and then also the SPA may serve as SPA for only a select number of trusts, and may not hold itself out to the general public as a fiduciary for hire. But with those requirements being met, the amount of control that it has over the operations of a South Dakota trust or South Dakota trusts are really quite substantial, and allows SP as a corporate person to take full advantage of the broad powers and discretions afforded advisors and protectors in the state.
Amazing. I do think it's an amazing structure exactly for that. I mean, talking a little bit about who this would help. We work primarily with a lot of attorneys' offices, accountant offices, family offices, investment advisors internationally, and these are the people who are normally referring trust over to us. I mean, the use of SPEs in these cases is a huge benefit, because you can essentially have one protected entity that will be your foot in the door in South Dakota to be able to operate all the trust that you work with. So you retain the control over the client's assets. You work in conjunction with your private trust company. With your public trust company, hopefully St. Joseph, but there's a lot to choose from here in South Dakota. So you retain the control over the assets. You're working with them, and you can do this for multiple clients. Obviously not selling yourself as a trust company. You're not a trust company, but you are a registered administrator of these assets. So it gives you protection, it gives you authority, it gives you flexibility, and allows you control. So it's a very positive structure. Dan, any final points before we wrap up today?
Well, that and specificity of purpose. I think that if you consider it from a documents perspective, which of course is the perspective from which I consider it, you really can have, a tailor-made trust instrument with a corresponding tailor-made corporate document or documents that are designed, to be interrelated and work with one another to prescribe with specificity the role of the SPE over the trust. And for clients who find control as something that's important, this can provide a very effective mechanism by making full use of the corporate law that's available in the state of South Dakota, and then also of the trust law that's available in South Dakota, which is, as JP is well aware, considered the premier jurisdiction for trusts in the United States.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for the interview today. It was great talking to you this morning. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Out of your busy schedule, and we will hope to host more of these podcasts weekly and hope to see you back in a future episode. Thank you so much.
I look forward to coming back soon. Thanks.